Howdy, partners. It is episode 5, and I stretch all the way across the globe to bring in a special guest, my personal favorite Slovenian. That's certainly a minority opinion here in Dallas and in the U.S., but I am referring, of course, to Iztok Franko. Iztok, man, I appreciate you joining me all the way from Ljubljana. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Tim, and glad that I made a list, one person in Dallas or in Texas favorite Slovenian list, top one. So that's really a nice compliment.
Well, and just to give folks some background on you, people here in Dallas know you. You kind of, as Luka was emerging as this force in the NBA, you emerged as this force in the Mavericks blogosphere. You're now writing for D Magazine, and really, you are following the Mavericks because you followed Luka since he was with Real Madrid. You follow the Slovenian national team. You dress up like a complete goofball and stand in the stand up and jump up and down. Kador da skače ni Slove. Hey, hey, hey. By the way, that and pivo are the only Slovenian words that I remember. What I just said is, if you're not jumping, you're not Slovenian. Hey, hey, hey. But they spell it H-E-J. But you really, you have an analytics background, a data background. And while you're a Luka fan, you really study the game of basketball. That's why I appreciate following your coverage. You put together some great videos, some of the analytics work that you do for D Magazine. You do a great job explaining the game through analytics, through X's and O's. And then you got a sweet spot in my heart because you were the best volunteer Slovenian tour guide that anybody in the world could ever imagine when I went over there to work on my book.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. I try both on basketball, learning basketball and analytics, and both in trying to be the good tour guide. So I hope you'll come back when the book is published.
There we go. I will definitely come back, and we'll have to hike Smarna Gora again. I guess those are Slovenian words I remember. I still remember exactly what they mean.
Yeah. It's the mountain. It's the name of the mountain that I took you.
But it's not officially. Anyways, that's a confusing story because it's not officially a mountain, but it sure as hell is high. Regardless, obviously, we're going to get into Luka. We're going to get into Maverick stuff, but let's start with another big-bodied NBA star. You have done just kind of out of curiosity, you went on this deep data dive regarding Zion Williamson. So explain kind of what your fact-finding mission was here.
Yeah, I was excited to watch NBA when it started, and I think the Pelicans opened against the Brooklyn Nets. And after the game, when they asked KD about how awesome Zion is and who he would compare him to, he really struggled. He struggled to find comparison. So he threw out the names like Rodney Rogers or Jason Maxill, these like short, thick bodies, but not as explosive. Then he talked about Charles Barkley. And because he struggled, I started to think, okay, so who are Zion comps? Yeah. So in my view, some of the guys that I first thought was, let's say, peak Larry Johnson, grandma, who was like very small, thick, athletic. Then the guys like, I don't know, Sean Kemp, Blake Griffin, but they're taller than Zion and not as thick, not as, heavy. So it was really difficult to figure out.
2 C's.
Yeah. So it was difficult to figure out the comp. So then I started to see, okay, one way to look at it, how to find the proper comp for Zion is obviously body type. And here are like guys that are similar weight and height. So we started to look at the body mass index, which is basically a correlation between height and body mass. And there, I think Zion is in top 20 all time in body mass index based on his height and his weight. Yeah. And it's difficult to find out even what is his actual weight. I used for my calculation what he was listed last year as 284 or something like that.
Right.
Although they say that he was way above 300, so I don't know about that.
And he's definitely way closer to that now.
Exactly. So that's why
I'll say 284 for him is more accurate than 230 for Luka, I think.
Okay, but even with 284, so this was the number that I used in my comps, he was up there in top 20. So then, like I said, Jason Maxfield, these guys, T guys, or I don't know, Oliver Miller, if you remember, Big Glenn Baby Davis, they were like these high body BMI guys, but none was as explosive. So let's say, okay, let's try to figure out who are the explosive guys. But then I try to, with some people in analytic community, how do you measure explosiveness? Because even now with tracking data, it's not as easy. So I started to think, and the first thing that came to mind is what is the most explosive movement in basketball, and it's a dunk, right?
Right.
So I started to look data back till 96 season when NBA started officially tracking dunks. Your buddy Kevin Pelton told me there was people who tracked it manually before in almanacs, but I couldn't get hands to that. So I started from 96. Who are the people that were top 10 in dunk? Shot profile, because they started to measure that as well in 96. So average distance. And what you figure out when you look at Zion is basically that he drives or he attacks the basket like a guard.
Yeah.
I think from 2013, when the second spectrum tracks drives, he's by far the most driving big man. So if you reduce guards in the NBA, this was his 2021 season. But then his shot profile is that of a center. His average shot distance is 3.5 feet from the basket. And so he's like baby Shaq. I think Seth Partnow did this analysis of these shots at the basket. To look at this combination, so who are the guys, let's say, that are heavier than 250 pounds and they had more than 100 dunks in one season, because Zion had 120 in 2020-21 season. And it was like only a few of guys like LeBron James, Blake Griffin, Ben Adebayo, Derek Favors, Jabari Parker, Zion, Terrence Jones, guys like that. If you raise the weight to 280 and 100 dunks, only two people remain, and these were Zion and Jahidi White. I don't know if you remember Jahidi White. He was a center,
he's easily forgettable, right? And obviously Wizards. Shaq. This is because this data goes before Shaq, or I'm sorry, it doesn't count Shaq's prime.
Yeah, no, it did. Shaq came into the comparison when we took shot distance, but here I was checking which guys were shorter than 6'9" and heavier than 250 and dunked at least 100 times. So this was only these two guys, Zion and Jahidi White, remained. And then when we added, for example, people with body mass index about 28, which is, let's say, quite thick, and more than 100 dunks, then we had like Dwight Howard, Shaq, and Andrew Drummond, Derek Favors, Eddie Curry, Andrew Bynum, Brook Lopez, and Jahidi White. So these were some of the people. And then as you look at this list, a lot of these guys ended there primarily because of injuries, because of the stress of their game and on their body. So this is where I connected to Jeff Stotts from, In Street Clothes, is the NBA injury encyclopedia. So we did an expanded list of these explosive guys that had a lot of dunks, a lot of, let's say, shots close to the basket. And we checked the injuries for more than, like, I think there at the end was 70 or 60 players in the comparison. And what it popped out, that there were some guys that had like two injuries, major injuries, and by major we classified surgery, like Zion had by age 23. And so these were like, of these guys from this list, only Jabari Parker, Andrew Bynum, Amare Stoudemire, Jamar Magloire, Nerlens Noel, Blake Griffin, and Ben Simmons and Zion were in this list.
And that's concerning. That's concerning because you're talking about a lot of guys who, of that group, I would say Blake's had the best career, and he had a great career. He's still playing, but he had a great prime run. But his game also changed a lot during that run. He became less and less reliant on athleticism as he went, and he did have injury issues throughout his career. Ben Simmons, we'll see.
You see now. You see yesterday.
He came back last night. He was on a minutes restriction of 20 minutes. He only played 16 because he wasn't helping him. And he hasn't moved the same coming off of that back surgery. And Zion, like the whole reason you delved into this thing is because Zion is so unique. I mean, to me, Barkley is the best comp for him because he's the only guy that I've seen who is, I mean, he was the round mound, the rebound, but like you go back to young Barkley, he was so explosive. And, he's the only other guy really on that list who, could grab it, could go, could be a one-man fast break. You could, just get him the ball and let him attack. I mean, he was dunking on people. He was this athletic specimen who, looked like he could play offensive lineman. And that Zion, he's also the one guy on that list. He wouldn't fit there because he didn't have the early career surgeries.
Yeah, that's exactly because when we were looking at this, so I looked also when the guys on the list who had the second major injury then by age 28. And this is when guys like Brook Lopez, Antonio McDyess, Eddie Curry, Nene, Dwight Howard gets in the picture, and everybody by that second major injury declined. So the guys who are really explosive, but not fitting, let's say, the body mass index, the thickness index, LeBron, Giannis, Barkley, Shaq, none of these guys had any major injuries until age 30. So this is when you say maybe this type of a game is not sustainable. And what you mentioned with, let's say, with Blake is what we see in these other guys that adopted, that stay in the league. Mm-hmm. Brook Lopez is similar. So as they declined, their average shot distance increased dramatically. So they adapted their game. They started to shoot. And this is where Ben Simmons currently struggles. And I think Zion will slowly, throughout his career, probably needs to adapt his game a little bit.
And by the way, Zion, last night, we're recording this Tuesday morning, last night made his first three-pointer of the NBA season. But look, right now, you don't want Zion shooting a lot of jump shots. Like, for what? Like you said, his shot profile, you look at his shot chart, and it's just like ink blots in the restricted area. And most of them, by the way, are full circles.
Yeah. When you look at to shot profile, his biggest comp is not even Shaq, but is Rudy Gobert and Clint Capella by shot distance. So
yeah, and those are guys who obviously are catching lobs and getting putbacks, whereas Zion is creating the vast majority of those. And, the Pelicans obviously have major concerns about his durability, and that's reflected in his contract, which, you can sum up the language of the contract as essentially they set it up to where he's on a max deal that is a year-to-year contract that the Pelicans can basically get out of at any time. There's clauses in there, but they put the clauses in there, like weight clauses, stuff like that they're going to have. If they want to get out of those deals, they can get out of those deals. Obviously, their hope is that's not something that they'll have to consider. But to me, this gets back to what's your conclusion here other than this guy is extraordinarily unique? To me, it's that the Pelicans have to operate as an aggressively win now team. Basically, not, hey, we've got this young superstar, we've got a long runway ahead of us. It's, hey, we've got this young superstar and we don't know how long he's going to either play at that level or, frankly, be available. So let's go all in while we've got him, while he's, one of the most dominant forces in the league. And, they really started that last year with the CJ McCollum deal, even though Zion wasn't playing. And again, I scoffed at that deal at the time. I was like, why are the Pelicans chasing a play-in seed? What are they doing? Well, turns out they got a guy who's a really nice, once Zion's back, number 3 option, who's a leader, who fits really well with that roster and who dramatically improved that team. But they've still got some extra future picks. They've got the swap rights with the Lakers, which honestly is one of the most valuable assets. Yeah, it's one of the most valuable assets in the league right now. And whether they use that for a player or whether they end up using that in a trade, I mean, they are set up to be extremely aggressive with a roster that's really good, really young, but again, the centerpiece of it, you can't necessarily make long-term bets. You gotta go short-term with him.
Yeah, but also, like you said, they put together good offensive roster, I would say. But we will talk, you said we'll talk about the Mavericks, which I, let's say, watch much more closely. But watching Pelicans, I think they have some of the same issues, like the Mavericks. So the Mavericks top 4, 5, 8 players are all offensive-minded players that are not really good defenders. And it's the same with the Pelicans. And the Mavericks now struggle mightily playing Joel McGee, and it's the same.
Yeah.
I'd say not to that extent, but the Pelicans struggle the same with Jonas because he's not really a good fit, not offensively, not defensively with Zion. So I think, for example, Larry Nance off the bench is like the Dwight Powell, their glue guy, who is much better fit, who can cover up for Zion, much more agile, and doesn't kill the spacing like these two guys do.
And you see him closing
together.
games for that reason, right?
Exactly,
Much like you see the Mavericks closing games a lot of times with Maxi Kleber. It's about the spacing, it's about the defensive versatility. And the Valanciunas thing is interesting because you use the JaVale McGee comparison, and I'm going to stick up for Valanciunas here and say, okay, I get what you're saying in terms of fit. Can you close the game with your starting center? He's not playing 3 minutes 25 seconds and going and sitting down for the rest of the game. Okay, he is a very productive old school player on a really kind of a new school. It's a new school league. It's a new school roster. And, when the Grizzlies traded Valanciunas, he's a great guy. He's the kind of guy you love having in your locker room. Teammates love him. He was extremely productive in Memphis, just like he's productive in New Orleans. He's a double-double machine, but it's in that old school way where if you have Jonas Valanciunas, you're going to have to dump the ball down to him on the block, right? And to your point, that affects spacing. It's unless you're an Embiid or a Jokic, feeding a guy or frankly, at this point now, Luka, feeding a guy on the block over and over and over again is not necessarily efficient offense. And part of the equation of that deal for the Grizzlies, where they took back a ton of salary, they got the number 10 pick in the deal, which is turned into, they picked Zion Williams. He's hurt right now, but had a really nice rookie year. But they basically said, hey, every post touch for Valanciunas is a possession when Ja Morant doesn't have the ball in his hands, right? And, Jonas Valanciunas setting up shop on the block, boy, that really clogs things up for Ja Morant, who you want to talk about dominant paint scores. This guy at 6'3", $174, led the NBA in paint points last year. It's just practically unprecedented. And suddenly the floor is much more wide open. Not that Steven Adams is some kind of spacing center, but he's a screener, right?
He's better passer from the elbow and better screener, better hands-off guy. So I think he feels better. Right?
Yeah, and so the floor is much more open for Morant, and he goes from being a very good scorer, right in the 19 point per game range to make such a jump that he ends up getting most improved player, as it looks like he's making another jump this season. And, when you've got Zion, you want open space around him because he can create his own space just by being so strong and so explosive. Yeah. But man, you give him lanes, and it's just and not just him, Brandon Ingram, and to a lesser degree, CJ McCollum.
And it's, as I said, I think the bigger issue is even on the defensive end. I watched the game, last Pelicans game or one before against Atlanta, and it was like watching the Mavericks. In the clutch, Atlanta, either Murray, Trae Young, pick and roll, Zion come up, defend the screen and roll. And KD talked yesterday after the Mavericks game about that, how Dallas is gimmicking the game up, zone. And this is where guys like Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber are the two bigs who are switchy, who can be aggressive, who can double, who can rotate in the back. And traditional, let's say more traditional defensive bigs like JaVale McGee, even Christian Wood struggle. And where Jonas struggles.
Did you say even Christian Wood? Like,
yeah, I don't want to piss off the Mavericks fans who wants him to start. So I would say even
Christian Wood he's a really nice player in the role that they have him, but he's not going to finish games because of exactly what you're talking about. They want to put their best defensive lineup out there to finish games, and he's not going to be part of that. With Maxi Kleber, it gives the Mavericks He's not. I mean, Wood can put it on the floor, he can score in the post and shoot it. Where Maxi's basically at this point just a 5-out catch and shoot kind of guy. Every once in a while, he'll mix in a roll and catch a lob, but not nearly as much as he used to. But yeah, like last night, and we'll get in the Mavs here. Last night, there's the whole show of Theo Pinson and Kevin Durant talking trash. And it's, this is Theo Pinson, man. Theo Pinson, the best 15th man in the NBA. He's just, KD's hollering at him. He's clapping at KD. And so I go in the locker room afterwards. I'm like, Theo, what'd you do to get under KD's skin? And he said, I told him he's going to have to be Magic Johnson tonight and pass. And KD's over there just talking about, y'all are doubling me. Y'all are triple teaming me. Y'all can't guard me one-on-one. And Theo basically is like, yeah, you're right. You are the man. You are that great. That's exactly why they're going to keep on coming at you, though. There will be doubles. There will be triples. There will be zone looks. They will junk the game up. And it worked last night. And by the way, he better get used to that, because I don't know if or when Kyrie's coming back. Certainly nobody's concerned about Ben Simmons burning them on the offense.
No, sure. And the Mavericks did this last year as well when Kyrie missed the game. So they won exactly the same way. They doubled KD, they junked the game, they played zone. And that's where you need, next to a guy like Luka, that's the reality for Christian Wood or for people playing with Zion. I think they're in pretty similar spot. You need a guy like Larry Nance, you need a guy like Maxi Kleber who can play high, who can show on ball and recover there in the back line. So these are the guys. Basically, it's the reality playing next to these two stars, which are great, both great offensively, but have their limitations on the defensive end.
Now, one of the you put out a video of just all the different looks. This was over the weekend, all the different looks that the Raptors threw at Luka. And I don't have his exact numbers in the game, but I think he ended up with 15 field goal attempts and scores 30 some odd points. Just picked apart everything they threw. The assist numbers weren't necessarily high, but it's a lot of making the right read, getting off the ball and that kind of starting the ball movement process. A lot of, even if they weren't technically hockey assists, Luka making brilliant reads to make the game easy on teammates and get it going. But there's a really funny clip in there. The Raptors, again, they threw everything in the world at Luka, including a box and one. And so a box and one, Luka's going to go stand in the corner, and the Mavericks are going to play 4-on-4. Well, Luka's standing in the corner, and it didn't look like Nick Nurse was an active participant in the conversation, but Luka stood in the corner and basically yapped at Nick Nurse the entire possession. The Mavericks score, and then he has some parting words, and off he goes. So last night, I asked KD about this. He corrected me. It wasn't a box and one. It was man defense, but it was man defense where Luka stood in the corner and KD wasn't in help position. KD was 1 foot in front of his face, and they're sitting there. It was very similar. It reminded me of your video because they're just sitting there having a conversation, and the rest of the guys on the floor are playing 4-on-4. And when I asked KD about that after, it wasn't box and one. We're just playing man. Okay. But the one thing he said is basically, when you have a guy like Luka, you're going to deny him. And he said they don't have anybody else on that team who knows how to dribble or how to create. And man, it's harsh.
It's true in a way.
But there's a lot of truth. I mean, you've got Spencer Dinwiddie, and there's not another proven ball handler on that roster. Hey, you're from Slovenia. Have you noticed how Goran Dragic is doing in Chicago?
No, we don't pay attention to that. So.
Oh, I bet you do. I bet you do. I bet he has the best plus minus on the Bulls.
My timeline every day is like, look, he's the best plus minus bench guy. No, I mean, I was not as offended as most Slovenians that they didn't make it work with Dallas, that he would looked like a great fit now. I think both Goran and Luka were very keen to start the new NBA season after their Eurobasket. I think that was things didn't end well, went sour, and I think both of these guys were like, let's forget about that and let's start hooping. So I think they're both started the season like on fire.
And by the way, for those who don't know, or for those Mavs fans who just want a painful reminder, Goran very much wanted to play with Luka in Dallas. You know, he's known Luka since Luka was, you know, the 7-year-old kid with the mop who would get up shots you know, during timeouts of his first pro league games when he was playing with Luka's dad Sasha in Ljubljana. And the Mavericks essentially said, "Hey, we've got a roster spot for you. We kind of see you as a foot shorter version of Boban. Great, you know, chemistry guy. Like, go out to dinner with Luka. You know, you'll get in every 5 or 6 games or so, wave a towel." And he's like, "Hell no. Like, I can still play." He's proving he can still play in Chicago. The Mavericks need a third ball handler. But Luka, what he's doing is ridiculous. Like, I mean, we are watching, with no hyperbole, one of the best starts to an NBA season in the history of the league. You know, now he's 9 straight 30-plus point performances. Only him and Wilt have done that. It's 36 points per night. I mean, the efficiency is absolutely insane. Until these last couple games, he hadn't shot 3 well. Now he's starting to get that going. And if that's a trend that continues, look out. But you tweeted out a stat today about how many the percentage of shots at the rim for the Mavericks, and you know, give me that stat again.
So the Mavericks historically, all Luka years were bottom 3. So first 4 years of Luka NBA career were bottom 3 in NBA in rim frequency. So basically Luka would drive, but none of the other guys would. And even Luka historically, I think last 2 seasons, so he was around 20% of shots at the rim. This year, Mavericks are 3rd in the NBA in shots at the rim. So they were above their 1/3 of shots, 46% shots at the rim for 8 straight games until last night in Blue Cream, and then managed to reach this number only 5 times all last season plus playoffs. So Luka is now from 20% shots of the rim at around 40, so double.
Right.
So he is like you said, he's playing like crazy. He's, I think, 14 drives frequency in NBA, one of the most efficient non-drives. I think he's 6 in post-up frequency, 2nd in free throws. So he's like putting pressure constantly. And like you mentioned, he didn't shoot the free ball well, but after first few games, he stops shooting them. I don't know, from 10 3-point attempts to like 5, 6. And he's just attacking. And he looks different. His first step, you were talking, I don't know, against Ben Simmons, or even if Ben Simmons now is not the best, let's say, benchmark in terms of defense, but when they played Toronto, he was driving by Scotty Barnes, so a good defender. So if he's getting by guys, he's getting to the rim and finishing there, or if he's not driving, he's just posting up everybody.
Well, that's the post-up game. I mean, you have to mention Luka now as one of the most dominant post players in the league, and it's obviously he's so big and strong. He's going to be able to get his position. And then he's so crafty in there. I mean, his pivot game, all the fakes, all that stuff. But it's a combination of finesse and just bullying. But he's getting to the rim. And then, you know, obviously the guy is in significantly better shape than he was the last 2 years. And, you know, Jay Kidd calls it Luka shape, which I think is probably the best way to say it. Because it's not like, you're not going to look at Luka and say, "Oh my God, you know, this guy, whew, you know, I bet you he can run a 4-minute mile." No, he ain't running no damn 4-minute mile, but he's not weighing 260 something like he did the last couple of years. He came in, you know, fresh off a Eurobasket where he got beat up a little bit, but you at least know he's running up and down the floor instead of you know, eating Chavapi and sipping those Union and Lashkos. To name a couple of my favorite pivos in Slovenia. Pivo, the one word I remember, translates to beer.
No, like you said, and just this mix and shot guy. So basically, if you replace 3-point attempts, even though step back when it falls, it looks great. But when you make it at a 35% clip, and you replace 10% of that shots, or 20 with shots at the rim, which you make, like, he's one of the best finishers at the rim in the NBA, so it's around 65-70%. It's like, he's crazy. I think he was shooting play about 60% from two-point range. So what he's doing now, the only question is, like we were talking before with Zion, and his play style is also how sustainable this season is this play style, because he's leading the NBA. I think he has 33% usage. So that's obviously not working well. And I mean, the Mavericks, they are playing like they did after the Porzingis trade, so they have a clear identity. But I think they need to figure a little bit things behind. So like you mentioned, Dinwiddie, they're missing Brunson. I think Dinwiddie was great in that third role, which was very simplified. And he talked about it. Jay Kidd told him, you just attack, you come in. And now I see sometimes he wants to be a playmaker. They want to get T. Hardaway Jr. going. So I think their pecking order behind Luka is not clear like it was last season, because last season it was Luka, Jalen, and Dinwiddie, and then everybody else. Now it's Luka, and then it's either it's Wood, or it's Hardaway Jr., or it's Dinwiddie. So it's a little bit, they're struggling sometimes to find the best rhythm, to find the best guy to attack. And I think this is something that they will need to clear up as the season progresses.
Yeah, and the sustainability with Luka is, hey, if he's attacking like that and has he led the league in usage rate the last higher than ever. Is he going to have gas in the tank in fourth quarters? Is he going to have gas in the tank late in the season going in the playoffs? So, that's where you start worrying about that. There was hope coming in. They mentioned Josh Green. Hey, Josh Green could be a third ball handler. I don't think he can be that guy, but I got to give Josh Green a little bit of love, because he has been really, really good this year. Last night, probably his best game yet. And it's funny, when Theo Pinson's over there doing his little KD agitation act, KD runs over Josh Green on the screen and gets a T for barking at him. I was like, Theo got him so mad that he wants to fight Josh Green. Now, KD clarified he wasn't mad. He was having fun. Okay. He's still, and so, as he's walking out, I said, hey, KD, Josh Green's one of the most polite young men in the NBA. Like, come on, dude. And he laughed. He said he basically had to get on him about what he thought was a flop, but he did say, hey, man, Josh Green is playing great. And like, if you don't watch the Mavericks, you might not even know who I'm talking about. And let's be honest, around here, Josh Green is known as the guy that Bob Voulgaris drafted when, depending on who you believe, Donnie Nelson either threw a hissy fit and left the draft room or whatever it was. Donnie Nelson thought he was going to draft Saddiq Bey. It became clear in the moments leading up to the pick that it wasn't his pick to make. It was Bob Voulgaris's, and he drafted Josh Green, who rough rookie year, showed some flashes last year, but wasn't playoff ready. Had to be pulled from the playoff rotation. And forget about Saddiq Bey, who he's getting compared to by Mavericks fans is Tyrese Maxey, who went 2 or 3 picks later. Desmond Bane, who went 12 picks later. These other guards.
Precious Achua, 2 picks later, I think.
Yeah, but specifically Maxey and Bane, because these are, they obviously were looking for wing help. And these are guys who, wow, man, you put them on this roster and no one's crying about Jalen Brunson being gone, because you've got, these capable guys who can create, who can shoot. And look, Josh Green's not going to be those kind of players. And okay, they didn't get the best player on the board, but man, this dude worked his butt off in the summer. As he says, got rid of the stanky leg on his 3-point shot. He is technically leading the league in 3-point percentage right now. Small sample size theater. It's 10 of 15, but still he's shooting it with confidence. And a team that desperately needs some athleticism. Woo! I mean, this dude is athletic and he's playing aggressively. And Jay Kidd said they got to get him more minutes. They got him more minutes last night, and he certainly earned them and responded.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I did, one analysis I did before the season. This season we was like analyzing more than basically all lineups that Luka played with in his last 3 years as a Maverick. And what came up last year was like when they played, especially in the playoffs, Luka and three and D guys, which was basically Dorian, Reggie, and Maxey, the only 3.
Yeah.
Their numbers were off the chart. The problem was that you cannot play Maxi Kleber more than 25 to 30 minutes, and Dorian and Reggie were playing 40 minutes in the playoffs. So that's, even in that article I wrote, if Josh Green can develop in one, that would be a huge lift for the Mavericks. Plus, there is one other thing that you mentioned. He has this unconventional game. I think that fits well with Luka because he doesn't need the ball, but he can still play make. So he play makes out of turnovers, out of offensive rebounds, out of cuts. He can put it on the floor and he can pass. And it's not like Spencer Dinwiddie or Jalen Brunson that you need to give him the ball. He will make out of these secondary actions. And this is where I think it really fits well next to Luka because the ball is going to be in Luka's hands most of the time.
Yeah, and he can get on the fast break and finish, which is something that, let's be honest, you don't see a whole lot with the Mavericks. And he can, when he's on the floor with Luka, the best kind of fast breaks are the ones where Luka never has to cross half court. He can just pass it up and let Josh Green catch the thing and go dunk it. The other team I do want to hit on, we got to hit on the Jazz, man. This is dead last in the Zach Lowe League Pass rankings. I mean, Zach's just killing their uniforms, says they're not a team. And look, let's be honest. It's not like Zach was alone in this opinion. The Jazz are going to be just a horrendous team to watch this year. Here they are. As of right now, they are the number 1 team in the Western Conference, sitting at 9-3. Will Hardy has them playing hard. He has them playing selflessly. They are a fun team to watch. The ball's pinging around. They're flying around defensively. Look, they don't have top-level star power, although Lauri Markkanen's having the best year of his career. Jordan Clarkson's having the best year of his career. But they came through Dallas last week, and it was one of their 3 losses. Close game. The Mavericks went down the wire. One of their 3 losses. But I'm talking to Conley after the game, and he did say, he said, if they want to lose, they're going to have to trade me too. He laughed, but the only starter last season who wasn't traded, and we'll see what happens there. But he basically was like, dude, you've got leftovers from last season's roster. Who these guys all know they were in trade talks. You've got a bunch of guys who, can feel like, hey, our previous teams gave up on us. We were traded. We were kind of like the undercards in these trades. Just a lot of guys who have a lot to prove. In Conley's case, he feels like, hey, man, I stunk it up last year in that playoff series against the Mavericks. Like, I've got to come back strong from that and prove that I'm still a guy who can play in the league. And then Will Hardy, who, by the way, is 3 months younger than Mike Conley. Dude, it's 12 games in, but it looks like the Jazz made an absolute home run of a hire with him. How hard they play for him, how selflessly they play for him. And when you watch the Jazz, what are you seeing from them in terms of what would you say is kind of Will Hardy's stamp as an X's and O's guy?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they have a clear identity, and if you watch the West, I think we talked about Mavericks, they have a clear identity, style of play. If you watch Denver, you know how they play. If you watch Memphis, you know how they play. And these are the teams, even Phoenix, who everybody doubted. They are the teams that are doing well are the teams that have clear identity, good spacing. If you watch then the Lakers, the Clippers, I think these are the guys. We talked about Pelicans, that they struggle a little bit with the best possible identity, lineup, spacing on the floor. Even Brooklyn, when we watched last night. So with the Jazz, I think Hardy's input is they play this 5-out system. A lot of the time they would play with 3 guards who can all drive. You mentioned Clarkson. There is Sexton. There is
Colin
Beasley,
Sexton. He's got a lot to prove coming off that injury.
There is Conley. So you have already 4 guys who can drive. THT, so Horton Tucker, he can also drive and attack. And then they pair them with 2 shooting bigs in Kelly Olynyk and Lauri Markkanen, and it's very difficult to defend.
Well, and the interesting thing about Markkanen is he is known as a shooting big, but he's doing his damage everywhere else. He's not shot the 3 well. He's scoring 21 plus per game, doing it efficiently. And you watch Eurobasket closely. You saw what he was doing for Finland, and man, it was like, woo-wee, this guy is, looks like a star.
He got his confidence, like as the guy. He talked about it. I was the guy. It was a big boost for me that I can do this. I can play on the high level. And now, like you said, it's not even with Markkanen necessarily punishing team with shooting, but they play 5-out, and when the defense collapses, he's one of the best cutters in the league. I think he's top 10. So he's cutting, he's dunking, he's finishing, he's making the secondary plays. But when you play NBA, the stretch floor spaced out, it's very difficult to defend these guys, Sexton, Clarkson. So you can see they are one of the best offenses in the NBA. And in this, if they're similar to Mavericks in terms of spacing, they're the opposite in terms of usage. So they don't have one guy like Luka who constantly puts pressure on you in rotation. They have four guys who do this the whole game. And there are like last year Mavericks that plays with two ball handlers all the time on the floor. They play even with three. So they are very good at that. And I think they have five guys who average at least 10 points. So in a way, offensively, they look great. As I said, constant drive and kick rotations. Where I think they can struggle is defensively. And we saw this in Mavericks game because they are small and Luka just picked apart. So it was like a la carte, every possession. Choose who will post up. It's either Clarkson's, Conley, Sexton, any of these small guys. But they play hard and they play organized and they play with, like I said, with identity and with style on offense.
Well, and they play with good vibes, which, man, I mean, it's a simple term, and it's like, what does that mean? If you followed that team last year, you know what the opposite of it is. You know what a miserable slog of a season that was for them, when obviously they had such not even high expectations, but pressure. There was just this cloud hanging over after they had the best record in the league. They collapsed against the Clippers after Kawhi got hurt in that series. And just kind of this black cloud of, hey, if it doesn't happen this year, this thing's probably getting blown up. Like that was just understood and known and lingered. And, you know, then there was the passive aggressive awkwardness between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And it was just a miserable season last year. And this is the opposite. It's no expectations, you know, fresh voice at head coach. You know, Quinn Snyder said, hey, it's time, and did a great job in Utah, but it was time he felt like it was time to close that chapter. Will Hardy comes in, new opportunity, new voices, a lot of guys who just have a ton to prove. And in that situation, you can have a lot of, you've seen teams where it's like, hey, got to get mine. And it's, you know, a lot of sticky basketball. This is the opposite of that. And it was interesting. They're playing the Clippers the other night in LA, and I'm watching on TV. And Clarkson plays a great game, you know, 23 points efficiently, 5 assists, you know, plays like he's been playing all season long. Well, they were down a little bit in the fourth quarter, and they come back and they take the lead, and Sexton's a huge part of this. And Hardy made the decision, you know what, I'm going to stick with this group. I'm going to let this group close it out. So here's Jordan Clarkson sitting on the bench. You know, after he's playing great all season long in this game, a lot of guys might sit over there and have, you know, feel a certain way about it, kind of mope a little bit, pout a little bit. So Sexton cuts, gets a pass from Olynyk and goes up for what's basically the dagger dunk. And as he's going up, you can see Clarkson in the background on the bench. As Sexton's going up, Clarkson kind of, you know, raises his fist with him, and he's jumping off the bench celebrating. I just thought that said a lot about kind of the culture, the vibe of that team. And I'm going to tell one other real quick Jordan Clarkson related story. Honestly, I'm going to tell it because I think it's funny. I'm also going to tell it because it's just a case of like, here you are, Will Hardy, 34 years old. You know, you came up through the pop system, spent 1 year in Boston, but you know, all that experience, you're figuring out on the fly what it is to be an NBA head coach. And he told me, you know, there's about 10% X's and O's and 90% everything else. And so he came in and he didn't want to be like, you know, ruling with an iron fist, my way or the highway. So it's like, I don't want to have a lot of rules. I want to keep it pretty simple, but you got to have discipline. And so one of the only rules he had was no jewelry during practice. One of the few rules. And so it's before the first practice, and one of the assistants comes in and is like, hey, Jordan Clarkson's here. He's got like diamond fangs. Like, I don't know. I guess they're like permanently, it's not a grill, I don't think. I think it's like he's got like diamonds like permanently implanted into a couple of his teeth, like the fangs. And there's like, is that jewelry? Like, what, you know, what are we going to say? And Will Hardy thinks about it. And he's just like, the hell with the no jewelry rule. Like, this is not the kind of thing that we're going to worry about here. Like, you know what? Screw it. And basically it gets to, One, Jordan Clarkson is quite the character, but it gets to Hardy kind of figuring out, hey, who are these guys off the floor, but even on the floor? And how do I kind of play to their strengths within a structured system? And man, a dozen games in, whew, he's done one hell of a job.
Yeah, no. When you talked about no drill rule, I remember again when we started this conversation with JaVale McGee. I think he was the one I think it was in LA, and they let him have jewelry in practice. He likes his chains. So
yeah, he's got
maybe that's a problem in Dallas now. I don't know.
Well, I think there's other issues. He's got 3 or 4 chains and plays a lot of times 3 or 4 minutes as a starter. Anyways, let's wrap this up with the cojones factor player of the week. How would you say cojones in Slovenian?
Oof, I don't know.
What's the closest facsimile? What's that?
Jajca.
Jajca. Okay, the Jajca factor player of the week. And, we had some buzzer beaters last week. We had Tyler Hero. We had Jeremy Grant, the step back
against Phoenix.
Yeah, and I was gonna go with Jeremy Grant. I was ready to roll with that, despite the fact that, like Tyler Hero, the NBA comes out with the last 2-minute report. The next 2, oh yeah, he walked in. With the Jeremy Grant one, was like, yeah, no crap. He took, he took a few steps there, buddy. He kind of moonwalked into that one. But man, it was Jeremy Grant's second buzzer beater. Or second game winner in the last seconds of the season. And so I was ready to give him this prestigious award. And then I'm one of those sickos who I watched and I enjoyed that Kings Magic game. I believe it was on Sunday, winning overtime. Paulo Banchero is phenomenal in this game. I'm really enjoying the Magic stink, but like they're a fun, quirky team to watch. And the Kings roar back, send this thing into overtime, take the lead in overtime, do some Kang stuff to let the Magic tie it up. And then De'Aaron Fox coolly, calmly, just struts across half court and pulls from the logo on a buzzer beater from the logo. That's going to get you the cojones factor player of the week. The Jajca factor?
Jajca. Yeah, I had to say, I watched this game live because it was early Sunday game, and it's here in Europe, so it's late night game.
Also, because you're an NBA sicko who will watch Kings
exactly. But I stopped at when you say the Kings started doing the King swing, so I went to sleep and I missed the shots right the next morning. But it was a great shot. Yes, he took it from half court. It was one of the better game winners lately. Yeah. Well, definitely took some cojones to make it.
There you go. Iztok, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to, at some point, getting back over there, continuing my tour of Slovenia, which in all seriousness is one of the most beautiful countries that I've ever been to. I don't know if you're willing to volunteer for anybody else as a tour guide, but did a hell of a job for me. You do a hell of a job at D Magazine. Highly recommend people follow you on Twitter, follow your work, and I appreciate you joining Howdy Partners.
Thanks for inviting me, Tim, and welcome back. And all NBA people are welcome in Slovenia. So.
All right. Well, adios, amigos.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.